Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to literally everything else and everyone else you could be using that time for.
What is missing with founders and their unwillingness to say no?
It's in our nature, and we've been trained to see no as a negative thing, when in actuality, it can be a positive thing if framed correctly.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. It is great to have Connor Drake with me today. Connor is a senior executive coach at MindMaven, and he's also the co-author of a new book that just came out called Radical Delegation. And for me, I actually had the pleasure of getting to know Connor because I knew one of his main partners at MindMaven, also the co-author of the book Radical Delegation. And we talked about this idea of delegation. How do you delegate a ton? What do you do on that front? And really digging into what that means and how that helps people become the best sort of leader, entrepreneur that they can be. And so it's fantastic to have Connor on this call today to dig in. What is radical delegation? What does it mean to delegate really well? But then also talking through what he's been coaching for 10 plus years. What does it look like for these entrepreneurs who you've worked with, who are the most successful entrepreneurs out there? And they still go through all these challenges. What are the challenges? How do they deal with it? The usual questions we like to ask in this podcast, but really digging into it, given Connor's experience across the board. So Connor, welcome to the pod today.
Excellent, Adam. Thank you so much for a great introduction. It's good to be here. I'm excited. As you mentioned, we just came out with Radical Delegation. In fact, literally like an hour before I got on this call, I finally got my physical copy of the book. So it's great to be here. It's been a journey of about 5 years writing this book in some form or another.
Wow. Okay, wait. So I almost want to ask, like, why was it 5 years? Like, is it that hard to write a book? What made it 5 years?
Oh gosh, so many things. So when Patrick, who's the founder of the company, my co-author on this book, in fact, 10 years ago when I joined the company, one of the things that came up in the interview was, hey, one day I want to write a book. You want to help with that? So in some ways, you could say it's been 10 years in the works, but really 5 years of focused work. And I think a big part of the reason it took 5 years is we didn't want to write another business book. One of the reviews that we got, I think, summarized it really well. They said a lot of books take one idea and expand on it for an entire book's length. And really what we want to do is write something really tactical for people, where you're not just reading this to get one good, interesting idea. You're going to get a ton. And what we ended up doing, with that in mind, we ended up writing I think the final version of the first draft was like 150,000 words. And the average business book is like 40,000 words for what it's worth. So we realized very quickly, really what we did is we wrote 3 books. And so we decided to call it a trilogy. Radical Delegation is the first in the trilogy, very focused on delegation, leverage, freeing up as much time as possible from wherever possible. But just that process of figuring out, how do you write a book? How do you take what we teach that thrives in a one-on-one coaching environment and make it accessible to readers and as actionable to readers as it would be someone who's working with us one-on-one? There's just a lot of trial and error, a lot of conversations with our audience, and figuring out just how to bring this to life in the best way possible.
And what are the key themes? If you can do like the super high level summary of radical delegation that people should take away from this chat potentially, but also go by the book. What are they gonna really learn, and why should they be doing it beyond the thesis of like delegate as much as possible, which is a good thesis, but why buy the book? What are the key takeaways?
Absolutely. So if I had to put it very simply, the principle of radical delegation is this. It's getting anything off your plate that needs to be done, but doesn't necessarily need to be done by you, or there's not either value add in you being the one to do it, or it doesn't fill you up in some way, shape, or form. If that's something you're passionate about, by all means, continue those things. But if there's things that you're doing, like writing emails, why are you the one still writing your own emails? One of the first chapters we dive into, basically stop doing that. Emails deliver great experiences, but no one's ever valued you for sitting down to write an email. They value you for being the one to press send. So if we can get you out of the creation step of that email where you're just dictating something that's, say, an assistant or an engagement manager, we can dig into that topic later, but an assistant writes on your behalf, places it in your drafts folder. So all you do is review it at the end of the day. If all looks good, great, you press send. If it needs some edits, fine, you spend 10 seconds editing this email. But you can get all of these email interactions out that provide value, that add follow-up in a fraction of the time. You can get down to a minute per email versus 10 minutes per email.
I mean, this is something that I've tried to do myself. I had two EAs. I actually had to fire one recently. The idea is one that I very much believe in. The question that I have, because this is the mantra of sort of delegation we actually talk about a lot. The whole idea is you outsource your back office operations. It is not why founders care about it's not why founders start a company to go run back office operations. Like if they did, then of course they should start. That should be what their startup's about. But the ones we talk to, that's not what their startup is about. Their startup is about the next great AI company or D2C or B2B SaaS or you name it. And yet I find it really difficult sometimes to convince founders that they should be outsourcing or handing off this work that they don't love, right? Almost by definition, the whole idea of being a founder of a company is that you are world class at XYZ and everything else should be handed off your plate, or at least everything that's not the number one and two most critical things in the company. And making sure payroll runs and your finances are in good shape and you're complying properly with state laws and equity are important. Those are things that need to happen to make sure your company is continuing, but they aren't the number one or two things, right? Building great product and go to market probably is. So my question though is, I buy into the thesis of what you're saying. Why do so many people fight against that and don't agree to handing off? Most founders I know don't have anybody helping them. They haven't handed off this work. They don't think about it that way. Why? What is missing in the world? Why is this mantra not being grabbed onto?
It's a good question. And I think a big piece of it, there's no one answer to that, but a big piece of it is, I think for the past, I'd say 10 years especially, there's been this hype around the concept of being scrappy, of grinding, because it's necessary early on. You're a scrappy company, you're 3 people, you're 5 people, whatever. As a founder, you have to do everything because you have no choice. You don't have the capital, you don't have the resources to go hiring all of these people. So you have to find inventive ways to do the work yourself. And you're, in many cases, especially by, say, investors, you're praised for that. Being a scrappy founder is something you get a badge of honor for. And it's necessary to a point that there comes a point where you being scrappy is no longer helping the company, it's hindering it, because the time that you spend running payroll, running the back end, it's taking away from other things you could be doing. I think a big thing people don't realize is that every time you say yes to something, you say yes to taking something on, you're saying no to literally everything else and everyone else you could be using that time for. You only think about the one thing we're saying yes to and not everything that we're sacrificing as a result of that.
It's essentially, I mean, you're sort of implying that everything is a choice in a decision, and every choice implies almost a binary decision, right? It's either a yes or it's a no. And every time you say yes, you are, by implication, saying no to something else. And therefore, but then, okay, so then why are founders, and maybe everybody, terrible at saying no or be not willing to say no? Is it just like the mentality of I can just do everything? Like what is missing with founders and their unwillingness to say no?
It's interesting. Founders, at least the founders who resonate with our work and the ones that we talk to, pretty much all of them without fail have this very innate, genuine desire to help, to make a difference. For a lot of people, that's part of the reason why they founded a company. They saw a problem they wanted to solve. And it's part of what makes them successful as a founder and an entrepreneur. But that genuine desire to help can also lead to overcommitment. A request comes in, you see something that needs to be done, and your natural reaction is, oh, let me take that on because I want to help, because I want to provide value. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is we've all been rejected before. We've all been on the receiving end of a no, and it doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of a no. So I think a lot of founders, or take founders out, humans in general, we don't like delivering negative experiences to others. So when someone reaches out and asks for help, even if there's a voice in our head, which there often is, saying, this is not the best use of my time, we don't want to deliver a negative experience. We don't have clarity on what else we could be using that time for necessarily. And so we say yes over and over and over again, and we overcommit to these things because it's in our nature, and we've been trained to see no as a negative thing, when in actuality it can be a positive thing if framed correctly.
How do founders get good at framing it correctly? How do they get better at this? Right. So fine, they should read the book. But what if they don't read the book, or they don't want to read the book? They don't have time to read the book. How do folks get good at doing this? What is the secret there?
I think the most foundational thing, as basic as this sound, there's a lot of founders who don't have clarity around this. It's as a founder, what are your top priorities? Not what are your team's top priorities, not what are the company's top priorities. as a founder, the office of the CEO, what are the 2 to 3 things that you need to accomplish over the next 3 to 6 to maybe 12 months that will have the biggest impact on the company's growth? It's one of the questions I ask anyone when I start working with them. And I'd say it's maybe 40% of the time someone can just rattle something off the top of their head. The vast majority of the time, I either get a blank stare and a realization of, oh, I haven't thought about that since our last planning meeting, the last quarter. Or they ramble off some really ambiguous, well, I'm going to try and do X, Y, and Z, and they'll ramble an answer. Most people don't have clarity in what their priorities are. And as a result, if you don't know what your priorities are, it's hard to say yes to the things that matter and no to the things that don't, because you don't know what it is you should be focusing your time and energy on. Does that make sense?
It does, but then what is the predicate to that? Is it setting up OKRs for every startup and company and for yourself? Like, what are the things then founders should do to get good at saying no in pushing back?
OKRs are definitely a part of it. I'd say for a lot of people, it can start simpler. Literally, a homework assignment I'll give most people when I'm working with them is just sit down, spend 20 minutes, write out everything that you think you should be focusing on. For most people, it comes down to usually, 12 to 13 things. And then I'll say, okay, pick the 3 that are the biggest impact. What are the 3 that you need to get done this quarter for the company to hit their goals? That's step 1.
Okay. And are those still just like the high level things? Like, in other words, it's like, I'll think about my own life every day. It's like, okay, well, I have some doing this podcast I think is really important and I enjoy doing it. I learn a lot, but then also there's, I'm participating in a lot of sales still for the company. That's really important. There's some key product things that I participate in that I think are still important for me. But guess what? I also have like a million emails that come in, and yes, I try to delegate a lot of that work. I also have customers who need to be like, they have challenges or they have customer success things. And like, I have a teammate who deals with a lot of that too, but they want to get it approved. And so I need to read it over. I need to be sometimes a customer wants the CEO to opine on their situation because that's what you need to do. Like, then all these little things just build up. And next thing you know, it's 10 p.m. at night and I finally can start thinking about product.
Yes. Oh, there's so many different ways we could take that. But the first one I'm going to say, I think an underlying theme there is, I think what you're saying is you can set these priorities. Okay, here's the 3 things I need to be focusing on. But on a day-to-day basis, a million other things come up. A million other fires crop up that they'll feel urgent, feel like they need your attention. And again, I think so much of that is ingrained in early startup. The idea of the CEO is the firefighter who rushes in and saves the day. There's a bit of sometimes a hero complex that comes into being the one who steps in and saves the deal. And I think as a company scales, one of the most valuable but most difficult lessons to learn is some fires you let burn, because it's not going to burn the company down. Or you empower someone else to be that firefighter. You mentioned your team member who reaches out and wants your approval on things. That's great for a time. But if you can train him to stop needing your approval, to have him when you review something that he's done, have him sit down with you and show him what you're looking for and what means approved and what means not approved. So we can get to the point where he doesn't feel the need to run things by you. Or if a customer reaches out, wants the CEO's attention, there's a place for that, but there's also ways to get leverage on that. If they want the CEO's attention, you don't have to be the one that writes the email. Let's go back to doing a dictation that someone else writes up on your behalf. You still delivered the experience. You just didn't have to be the one to create it and invest the time.
Yeah, no, look, it's a good reminder of, in this actually, I try to tell my team the same thing. It's basic, look, spend a little bit of time, make a video of how you do this. Explain how you get it done so you don't have to redo it over and over again. And the problem, once again, I find with at least a lot of my teammates, myself included, and I think with a lot of founders, is an inability or unwillingness to make these relatively small investment in training someone else to do that work that then gets you a much longer term return on your investment, right? This is essentially, it's basic economic theory 101. You make an investment and yes, it costs you money. I buy 1 share of Google stock today and it costs me, I don't know, whatever Google stock, let's call it $500 for Google stock share today. The idea is that it's going to pay me back way more over time because it goes up in value and pays dividends and everything else. That's an investment. Same thing with the education. Why do I go to college and get an education? It costs a lot of money, but the idea is that it's going to pay me back over time. People get that, but I find that people have a much harder time applying it on a day-to-day basis where I want to make that investment in training someone else or handing these things off. Yes, it takes me a bit more time today, but it's going to save me that much more in the future. It's like, what do you tell people? And like, you need to make this investment.
The idea, I think, with just about anything that we do, we very rarely want to go in and tell a CEO or a founder, hey, we're going to rip out the engine of what you're doing and completely rebuild it. More often than not, it's really about making small tweaks. Okay, let's tune the engine rather than rip it out and give you something brand new that you have to build. And so that's the perspective we try and look at. What are the small things you can do right now that's going to make this easier for you? And to give you an example, to build off what you were talking about, one of the ways that we'll often develop new best practices or train someone new to do something is uh, I find a lot of the time coaching and parenting have a lot in common. I'm not sure if you're familiar with I'm probably going to mess it up, but there's the framework for teaching your kids something new where it's step one is I do it for you. Step two is you help me do it. Step three is you do it and I help. And step four is you do it on your own.
I don't know that, but I like it a lot. I should implement that. I mean, I tried to do that with my son. I'm like, I told him this morning, get yourself dressed. I'm not going to help you. Choose what you want. But yeah, I know the idea.
And I feel like a lot of people, both in parenting and in leading, we tend to try to jump to step four. We say, okay, I hired you, now do the job. And there's a place for that, of course. You want to hire great people who can do the job, but it's also, as a CEO, it's on you to set them up for success. And there's a bunch of different ways that can look, but one thing that we're a big fan of doing just internally at MindMaven is if someone's learning something new, if we're building a new process, say someone's reporting to me or someone's reporting to Patrick, we'll say, hey, as you do this, please create a checklist as well. What are the steps that you think you need to do to get this to completion? And along with the final result of whatever it is you're working on, please send the checklist. And we can review that together. And you're giving them ownership over the process, which I think is important. You're empowering them to think through beginning to end what needs to get done.
I'm writing this down, but I love the idea of kind of ownership of the process, and like we do some of that ourselves. That's great. Are there other key things you tell people to do as well?
I'd say a big one when it comes to delegation in general. Far too many people are ambiguous about what the outcome is. You hand something out, you say, hey, get this done. And you have a clear picture in your head of what you think that should look like. A lot of the time, you don't realize you do. But if you were to spend 5 minutes to think through before I hand this off, what is it I expect back? And communicate that. Communicate a deadline. That's another big one where people just say, hey, get this done. And it's been a week, but you expected it in 3 days. But you can communicate that you expected it in 3 days. There's a lot of very sloppy delegation in general. So when you're handing something off, know what you want, know when you want to, and essentially do your work first and then hand it off to someone else.
So we went down way down this topic earlier than I wanted to, in the sense that I want to go back to the very beginning and really ask the question I like to ask everybody. What is entrepreneurial excellence in your mind? How do you define that? And what does that look like, given all the people you've worked with, in lessons you've learned, I'm sure books about that you've consumed? What is your definition there? Because most people probably wouldn't say it's the people who are the best delegators. Maybe that's your answer. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Like, what is your answer for entrepreneurial excellence?
I'm going to start with a bit of a non-answer, then I'll drill deeper. The non-answer I want to start with is I don't think there is one answer to that. Some of the language that we use a lot when we're talking with people is, we help leaders achieve true greatness.
But how do you define greatness?
Exactly. How do you define greatness? For some people, it's literally, hey, I want to build an industry disrupting company that generates X amount of revenue. Great. For some people, it's a legacy for their kids. For some people, it's, it's a very environmental or, impact driven approach. Excellence, true greatness, full potential, whatever language you want to use, it tends to be very, very subjective. But if I had to boil it down, I would probably lean into the idea that excellence isn't so much a destination that you arrive at and say, hey, I have reached true greatness or I have reached excellence. I think for our own sanity's sake, it has to be a journey. It's something that you strive for. It's striving to be better, to build something better, to be a better person, a better leader each and every day. It's measured, I think, not just in business outcomes, at least from my perspective. It's measured in impact, in your own well-being and the well-being of those around you and the impact that you are making in the world. I think at least most of the founders I've worked with, they might initially come to us and start working with us because they want a bunch of time freed up or because they want, X amount of revenue from new deals if they want to focus on the relationship work we do. All of that's great. But I think where they find the most fulfillment is in what they use that time for. And again, in my opinion, that's the pursuit of being a little bit better than you were the day before and having a meaningful, measurable impact on those around.
I certainly personally agree with that one. I mean, that's one of my goals. How do you measure that though, right? And I think, and I ask sort of to an extent that measurement to me seems like a fairly important component, or even if it's your own measurement you set up and you're kind of BSing yourself, but like how does one measure that? And I ask also with the framework that a lot of people that I've interviewed define entrepreneurial excellence. And look, we're talking about people building a business is in the capitalist American society that we live in, the way that most people measure excellence is by the capital related outcomes that you achieve. Understandably, like that is to me implies to some extent that you built a product in a company that people are willing to pay money on because it provides value, in which case it's achieving the goals that you set out to do with that business. I mean, you might, so like, how do you play out that, how does one measure those outcomes to know that you've achieved excellence or greatness in your term?
That's a fair question. And I think when it comes to the business objectives, like you talked through just now, there's a million well-defined systems for that. There's, of course, OKRs, or there's I think it's entrepreneurial operating system. There's all these great ways to measure revenue and churn, and we don't need to get into that. The other side of things, maybe the more personal side, the impact made, that is a little bit more challenging to measure. Maybe the best example I can give is a client I've worked with a little while back, where he started to get in the habit of basically what he would do is at the end of each day, he would write down one meaningful interaction he had with someone every single day, even just a 30, 45, 60-second conversation you had with a team member in the hall. And being able to look back for him, he looked back after a month and said, wow, this has been 20 something work days of meaningful interactions I've had with people. And it's not as data driven as, okay, here we hit this sales quota, we have this percentage churn rate. It's not as measurable as that. But I think relationships do operate a slightly more ethereal space where it's about the impact you feel you're making on others and having a way that you can reflect back on that in a meaningful way, whether that's journaling, jotting things down in some sort of a task management tool I've seen, or I don't have a way to show you, but I have a whiteboard on a door over there where I track writing. I do a lot of personal writing. And being able to check things off. Yes, I hit my writing goal for the day. Yes, I had one new meaningful interaction today. Just small things like that go a long way.
And so is your contention then that this is how people reach their level of excellence is basically by them figuring out what their goals are, what hitting those metrics, maybe it's impacting other people, financial, you name it. Now, at the same time, they must have some level of like, where does that all lead to? Like, and I asked this, like, I don't know if the most successful, quote unquote, like financially successful founders are by any means the happiest. Certainly some of them publicly are some of the really unhappy people, at least based on their Twitter personas or something. But at the same time, they've certainly achieved the outcomes that their investors and in probably a lot of their stakeholders, right? At least certain the people who work on those teams expect, and frankly, are probably inspired by. How does that work though when someone's like, okay, like I want to make everybody's life better every day, and did I have one meaningful conversation? Like that sounds nice, but a little bit almost too nice. It's like, well, at some point, that founder who's making an impact every day, unless they're making a financial impact, they probably won't be able to continue to afford to hire Connor Drake as their executive coach because your rates, I'm sure, are very high. So, like, where does that lead to from sort of a life perspective, and then also once again, like a business perspective? And then I want to dive into like what that means to build the business that can continue to afford to let the CEO have a great executive coach like you.
Sure. So I think we need to maybe zoom out for a moment here and talk relationships as it relates to success. Because yes, the idea of being more fulfilled because you're having more meaningful interactions, that is hugely important. And I find it very hard to personally have any definition of excellence or true greatness that doesn't include personal fulfillment and happiness. I think the two can't exist separate from one another. That's my personal definition. But at the end of the day, whatever your goals are, whether you want to look at it just from a strategic, financial, or growth perspective, as an organization, we firmly believe that no one has ever reached any meaningful level of success and kept it without help from others. There's very, very few. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say there really is no one who has reached measurable success without help and support of others, whether that's the team that you build, the investors that you bring on board, the mentors that you've had, or just people who've shaped your view your viewpoint over the years. Relationships cannot be separated from success. And most people I have found agree with that statement. I've never had anyone push back on this idea of relationships drive success. But I have found that most people, whether I'm talking to founders of 3-person companies or leaders in 5,000 plus person companies, there's this acknowledgement that as important as they are this ethereal thing that most of us don't put intentional time and effort into. And as a result, we're stunting our own growth. We're stunting the growth of the organization as a whole because we're leaving value on the table by not investing in the single greatest driver of success, at least in my slightly biased opinion.
So then what should they be doing when it comes to building those relationships or creating those connections? What should someone be doing? What does that look like? How do you do it with time constraints? Like there are constraints to your point of delegation in what you think about. There are constraints on my time every single day. And I only have so much time in a day to spend time. I have to decide, do I do a podcast chat with Connor or a one-on-one with my teammate? How do I make these trade-offs?
Part of that's going to come back to, and I'm beating a dead horse here, part of it's going to come back to the priorities that you set. What is truly most important for you right now? Is it the one-on-one with the team member? Is it the podcast? If they're equally important, then of course they can both happen and you find the time. But the key is, of course, finding ways to make the things that you have to do as simple and as as least demanding on your time as possible. And that can be simple things like you and I talked about at the beginning. If you're writing your own emails, stop. If you have an assistant, start dictating your emails so someone else can write them. If you don't have an assistant, there's a million AI tools with a million more coming out every day that can take some of that burden off you as well. So again, all you do is talk through an email, something else writes it up, or it's someone or something else drafts the email on your behalf. So looking for these quick wins that save, maybe just in that one email instance, it saved you 5 minutes. But if you're doing that 20 times a day, that adds up quickly.
Yep. No, that's fair. Continuing on that path a little bit, like where do we get to with, like, what are the elements of the sort of greatest entrepreneurs, either that you've worked with or have read about? What are elements that you think make them successful, either however you want to define it, right? Great, successful, excellent, whatever your definition is, or life, like how do you, what are the shared elements that they have in their personalities or the way they run companies?
I'd say probably the single greatest thread that I've found in everyone that I've had the opportunity to work with is that there's an element of proactivity. A lot of people, I think, naturally as a company scales, they become increasingly reactive. There's new stages that come up and new challenges, and so your team's always coming to you with questions and fires that need to be put out. And it's very easy and very natural for founders of a scaling company to constantly just be reacting to whatever's right in front of them at that moment. And that's even reflected in how most people would run their inbox. You get 1,000 emails a week, and most people just process it from the top down. Not what's the most important email in here, but what's ever most recent and most top of mind for me. And so I think the single most important thing is that element of proactivity where you're the one deciding in advance, here's what my time is being used for. And you slot others' requests around that. You slot the fires around the things that you need to get done. A lot of founders will talk, for instance, about wanting more proactive thinking time. It's usually proactive thinking time is one of the things a founder does best for an organization. And it's very easy and very natural in the early stages of a company to find that. In fact, that's almost solely your job early on, is to think and to build these incredible products, and then you scale and you start to lose that. And so I'd say the thing that most of the most successful clients I've worked with have had in common is a very structured approach to make sure the things that matter most, whether that's thinking time to invest in culture, fundraising, it's not left to chance. It's left to systems that are put in place so you make sure you have this time on the calendar. You know what you need to be focusing on. Again, everyone else's requests for you, they're slotted in around what you already know is most important.
So do you find pretty quickly with the clients that you have, if you think through all the clients you've worked with, do you know pretty early on the ones who are going to actually have a successful outcome, however it's sort of defined? Do you know, you're like, okay, I'm going to try to work with these people, even if they're not going to be good outcome, because that's why they're coming to me. But there's ones you're like, you get it. You're going to be putting the right things in place do you know pretty quickly?
I do, but it might be from a different metric than what you're thinking about. I would say those who come to us are more focused on, the ones who are most successful are very often more focused on what they want to be using their time for, rather than just, here's things I want to get off my plate. It's more focused on the here's the outcomes I want to be achieving, not just the here's the pain I'm in right now. And that can be a hard state to be in, especially as you're scaling. And again, there's a million fires all around you. But those who have the clarity of not just I want to free up time, but I want to use my time in meaningful ways tend to be the one that are most successful.
So when they want to use the time in a meaningful way, and they sort of said like, my meaningful way is I want to, but what does that look like? I want my product to have 10x more users by the end of the year. Is it like something like that? Or is it versus like, we are having trouble with onboarding people right now and I don't know how to fix it? Like, to me, like, one is sort of a big macro goal. One is much more specific. Is that the right way of looking at it? Or is it bigger than that? Like, what are some examples?
I'd say it's both bigger and smaller than that. Typically what we do, what makes us maybe unique as an executive coaching company is we're not coming in and coaching the organization. We are very, very focused on the office of the CEO. What are the tweaks that we make within the office of the CEO that'll have the biggest impact on the CEO's sanity, on their mental load, and things that are on their plate, and as a result have a ripple effect on the organization. So the most common things, frankly, that I see, in fact, let me take a step back. Before I get on a call with anyone, someone reaches out, they want to learn more about what we do, I'll give them a very simple homework assignment. 2 lists. In fact, I'd recommend everyone who's listening to this, give this assignment a shot because it's hugely valuable. Create 2 bullet point lists. Bullet point list number 1 are all the things you're currently doing that are bogging you down, for lack of a better term. Things that you're doing that you don't want to do, that you don't need to do, that they're dragging you down. And this can be personal, professional, everything's fair game. And then bullet point list number 2 is the opposite of that. Say we get rid of a bunch of those things on list number 1. What are you using your time for instead? Because there's no value in freeing up an hour from your calendar every day if you just dump that hour into inbox management. You went from one reactive hellhole to another. So having that balanced approach of freeing up time, but using it in meaningful ways, whether that's big picture thinking time, building culture is another very common one I'll see. And believe it or not, maybe it's the work that we do, just the type of people who are attracted to this type of work, but it's very common just to see more relationships. I feel disconnected from my team, from the people who used to matter and support me, and I want to rebuild that connection.
And so basically, by them creating these lists, it then is the idea that it enables them to start prioritizing properly and start saying, okay, and then it gets them in the mindset of like, I want to delegate these things because my top goal, my dragging me down list is I have all these emails. And therefore your answer is great. Let's find a way to use AI or an EA to remove that from your plate. Is it those sorts of things?
Exactly. And so many of the items that frankly make both of these lists, but especially the list that do less of, the bog me down list, so many of the items that are on there for most people are so easily solvable. It's just that no one has taken the time to really sit down and think through them. They're focused on the company. They're not focused on themselves. They're not focused on the fact that, they look at email at a very micro level. Okay, this one email took me 45 seconds. Great. But you did 300 of those today.
Yeah, you add it up and like the time and also the context switching elements, all these pieces. But once again, like to go back where we started, the personal pet peeve of mine, so many founders do not understand this. Like, do not think about it. I preach it all the time because like for Levy, we save people 500 hours a year on average. Like they'll get 500 more hours a year. That's 3 months almost of extra work you can do and focus on the things you care about or go work out more, like whatever it is. And yet they're like, no, I can handle it. I'm like, but why? Right? Like it's very frustrating because people just don't always get it. But it sounds like you're preaching that good fight in getting out there. What is then, walk me through like what drives some of these entrepreneurs. So I get it. Like, okay, you want to write down these lists. I want to get some of this stuff off my plate. The people who are good at that are going to be the ones who are most successful. What's the underlying driving function that you found for a large number of the best entrepreneurs you've worked with?
I think for a lot of founders, there is kind of the best way that I found to describe it is there's almost a chip on their shoulder, or there's something to prove. They want to be the best version of themselves so they can build the best version of this company. And they're starting to realize that there are things that are holding them back. And usually by the time they're talking to us, they're at the point of something has to change. There's this gap of, okay, here's where I am. Here's where I know I could be. And if I were up here, here's what the company could look like. And so there's this drive. It's almost a personal ego thing in a healthy way. Ego is so often used as a negative term, but I think we need a healthy ego to to want to be the best version of ourselves and to build a wildly successful company. And so it's that drive of, I need to be more. The company demands more of me, but I can't get there right now.
Do you think there's something that goes back? A lot of people I interview, I kind of ask them where they came from. Like, what was your childhood like? Like, where did this come from? Is a lot of it going back to themselves as like a kid? And like, I don't know, you're more of the psychologist, psychiatrist sort of thing. Like, where's it coming from? Or is it just sort of an innate, like, I want to change the world and have an ego big enough to think that I actually could pull that off? I mean, where does it come from?
That's such a good question. The example that immediately comes to mind, you mentioned childhood. There was a founder that I didn't work with personally, but someone else in the organization did, who traced it back to, trying to remember the details, but generally speaking, traced it back to their father. It was, their father had this wildly successful company, but they had an awful relationship, the two of them. And it was almost a kind of a middle finger to his dad to say, you know what, hey, I want to build a successful company, and I'm going to do it and have a relationship with my kids. I'm going to find a way to do both. And so I think for a lot of people, there is one pivotal moment they can point back to where it's like, this is why I'm doing what I do. But I think it's different for everyone. What I want to say is, I don't think everyone quite has it. I have respect for it. I don't think I have it personally. I don't have the desire to build a company. I thought I did when I was younger, before I was a coach, before I went into this world. I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. And as I started going on that track, I realized, you know what? I don't have that competitive drive, that ego, that edge. That, again, I don't mean to say that as a negative thing. I didn't have that chip on my shoulder and that desire to prove something to the world or to anyone in specific. And I think in many ways that held me back.
What % of founders that you work with really, truly you think have that? And so I asked in a sort of a personal way, like, this is just my own thing for myself, but like, I'm a 4-time founder. I've had some success, but also I always think I could be doing better. And I wonder, like, am I competitive enough? Do I have enough of that drive? Like, I work really hard. I'm very focused. I try to like literally regiment my life to do all the things and give myself enough time to do the things that I really care about, which is basically like family and work. And that's kind of it, to the detriment of personal relationships and hobbies and a lot of other things. But yet I'm like, man, I'm not as competitive. Elon Musk, that guy basically doesn't sleep. And he somehow has, I don't have time to do Twitter and play around with it, but he somehow has enough time he can go buy the damn company. Like, what? I wonder, am I at that level? And it's something I question in the back of my head on a regular basis. What do you think? What percentage of these founders really are next level special? And how do you know as a founder if you are? And then can you train yourself to be that way? Or is it something that's innate and you're just never going to get past that?
Most things in life, it is going to be a mix of nature and nurture. I would say the vast majority of the founders I've worked with have some competitive edge to them. Even if it's just competing with themselves. You just talked me through, hey, I'm not as competitive as Elon Musk. That's competitiveness right there. You're comparing yourself to someone else and saying, hey, I'm not at that level. I don't think there's again, one right answer to how competitive do you have to be. But I do think a lot of it can be learned. In fact, I'm proof that a lot of it can be learned. I was not a competitive person by nature. For a very long time, I was very satisfied with status quo, with, hey, things are good enough. And then through a long series of events, I realized good enough isn't good enough. And I'm not happy showing up the same person I am, showing up as the same person I was yesterday, today. And so for me, it's a very personal competitiveness. And that I found I was able to develop more so than a competitiveness with the world around me. And that was just, that was a learned skill, just through endless amounts of reading and audiobooks.
And what do you think? I mean, so many founders probably go through that same sort of journey. How many of them really learn it and figure it out? And I mean, look, and I'm sort of asked, it's almost setting you up because like, I think statistically, very few get at least financial success. Like maybe they learn a lot, they grow, things like that, but like they actually don't have financially successful outcomes. Or if they do, it's at the detriment of a million other things in their lives. So where's the right trade-off there? What should people be thinking about? Like, because from using myself as an example still, like, could I be more like Elon Musk in that way? Like, do I want to be more like that? Like, I'm not sure. But at the same time, am I holding my company back because I'm not willing to push everyone on my team and level them up? And people want to go join and work for Elon's companies because they know he's going to push them to do things they've never done before in their lives. It's the same thing as like going to play and sort of, I listened to a podcast recently about Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And those guys were not nice. But man, they won championships nonstop, and they pushed everyone around them to be at a bigger, higher level than they'd ever been before. I personally would have jumped at a chance to go beyond those teams if I were a basketball player and with 6 foot plus size and everything else. If I could have even done it, I would have loved to be a part of that, even though knew it meant I'd be working that much harder. And I think people do the same thing. I was reading about how people choose to go to Elon Musk companies over competitors because they think Elon's gonna push them to be better and different and really inspire something greater and different. But how do founders find that in them, or should they find that in them?
I think it comes back to what we were talking about on excellence, personal greatness. If you are looking to build the next Tesla, the next SpaceX, where you're changing the shape of the world, then it's not only a should, it's a must. You have to find that drive in you to be, you used the term mean, but to be a little bit mean, to be that chip on your shoulder. You will succeed at all costs.
Is it also holding yourself to a different level, different standard, right? I mean, I would imagine a lot of the best people, even let's say thinking about podcasts, right? I'm trying to think, what do the best podcasters do? A lot of them are well known as probably kind of being like a-holes to some extent. But man, they are really smart. They are on it. They ask great questions. They are well prepared. They probably hold themselves to a different level. And that's almost everybody in any activity they're doing. Probably the best executive coaches, same thing. Like you can be a great executive coach, make good money. But if you want to be the ones that are charging multiple thousands of dollars per hour, or going in, or even not doing coaching anymore, you're just giving talks for $50,000 or $100,000 for every talk. You probably need to be at the next level, and like that's just holding yourself to a different level of excellence, I would imagine. But I'm being very biased on this. Like, what is your take on this front?
You do have to hold yourself to a different level, but I think it's also important that you know what that level is, rather than make assumptions. There's an interesting study done, and I wish I could remember who did it. But ultimately, the conclusion of this study was that human beings are one of the only creatures, if not the only creature, capable of predicting the future. The issue is that we are awful at it. And then there's really only one way to successfully, as human beings, to successfully predict what the future is going to look like. And that's to find people who are already doing what it is you want to do and connect with them, learn from them, ask them questions. And that's easier said than done for some people. If you want to be the next Elon Musk, you're probably going to have a hell of a time reaching out to him and trying to, grab a coffee with him.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? I mean, to your point, like on that front, I'm shocked by how many people don't reach out and ask questions, right? Most entrepreneurs who are good or want to give back their time and help out in any field, and people are unwilling to ask. It's shocking to me, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe so many people are scared of really greatness or putting themselves out there. What is it, once again, like holding people back that you coach? Is it they're scared of that? They're scared of what it might mean to really, really be great. Like they have some drive. They're an entrepreneur,
Sure.
but they're missing an extra gear to go to the next step. Like, what is it?
I think, again, it's a mix of things, but a big piece of it is going to be this false idol, if you will, of the self-made person. Hey, look at this amazing company that was built out of nothing. Just because it was built from nothing doesn't mean it was built without support. And so we praise these people for figuring things out and bootstrapping, and all of that is great, but we do so at the detriment of realizing, hey, they didn't do it on their own. You can't do it on your own, and you have resources if you're willing to ask for them. So there's nothing wrong with you just because you can't figure out, how to get from A to Z in one step. You have to be willing to find the people you don't need to go straight to Z, but if you're at A, find someone who's at C and reach out to them and say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Or, hey, even better, or don't do the ask for a cup of coffee thing. Say, hey, I've done some research. I've looked into your journey. I really admire you for these reasons. Here's 3 things I'm struggling with right now. 3 very specific questions. Would you be willing to send, a quick 4-minute video sharing your thoughts on them? Make it really easy for people to say yes. And most people will.
And then is your contention that people, when they ask those questions and they start learning, that's how you're able to push yourself and grow and get better, like and do better at your like, if you're going to choose to be an entrepreneur, how do you choose to do this the right way? But this goes for any career, right? Like it bothers me to nonstop when people do any job and they're just kind of going through the motions and never trying to do it better. It's like, no, like any job, you can push yourself to be the best in your field. Actually, that's part of why I had to let my EA go, was because in the end, I literally, he said said to him, you'll laugh at this. I said, I read Radical Delegation. I've read your book. I've read also Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, also a great book, similar sort of topic. I want you to read it and summarize to me what we can do better together. 3 months later, nothing had ever happened. And I kept reminding him about it. And I was like, you don't want to be the best EA possible. And I'm tired of trying to push you and train you to get to that level. And there were other reasons, of course, that also came down to it. But like, those are the questions that I think I'm shocked by how many founders don't do that and don't read all the books and read the bios and understand what these founders have done and then reach out. I've done some of that. I want to do more. Why? So what, is it fear that people don't do it? Is it what's holding people back?
It's interesting. I think fear does play a part of it. No one likes being rejected. I think another part of it is the pace of a startup is often so rapid that they don't take the time to think to do it. It's one of those things that's it's important, but by its nature, it's not urgent. And everyone knows the urgent versus important matrix at this point, but because it falls into that important but non-urgent camp, maybe it's an idea that comes up every once in a while of, oh, I should reach out to so-and-so. I'll do that later today. And then the day gets derailed and the thought doesn't come up again for another week or another month. And you have that same thought. When I have more time, when this meeting wraps up, I'll reach out to so-and-so. But because it is not urgent and because there's not structure in place in most people's days to do things that are important but not urgent, it never gets the time or the attention it deserves.
So that's maybe important versus urgent. I want to ask a question on that front too. And then actually I want to get to sort of culture and building a team in that piece too, because it's also really important because you can't do it alone. But the reason I bring up important versus urgent and why it's a really interesting point is I've actually found, so there's sort of an idea that I've been noodling on for my company right now. And it's become something I'm like, this is a really good idea. I think this might be really interesting. And suddenly, out of the blue, I found myself having time to reach out to a lot of people to ask questions about like, hey, like, let's sit down. I want to get your take on this. What do you think? This wasn't an idea that I'd been in the back of my head for a long time, but wasn't kind of more real till recently. And suddenly I found the time. It's now important to me. And yet suddenly I find the time to go have these questions and reach out to people. Even though my schedule is the same as it's always been, there's all the other things on my plate. And maybe I'm just ignoring some of the other things more. I'm not sure. But it's sort of fast. I'm like, wait, how did I find this time to go sit down with this person and have this conversation and reach out and discuss this stuff? It's sort of funny how people suddenly, when something becomes important or maybe when it becomes urgent, you find the time.
Exactly. People can almost always find the time for things that qualify as both urgent and important. It's usually, especially in the scaling stages, where things that are important but non-urgent, or at least perceived as non-urgent, they tend to fall by the wayside.
But so then on that note, right, to the same sort of idea, as a founder and CEO, you kind of have the choice of saying, I want to go do this or I don't want to do this. And have I made a mistake for myself by saying, I think this is now suddenly urgent and important and gone off on this sort of totally tangential direction instead of saying, you know what, I've set really clear goals for myself for the quarter. I need to stay within those and focus solely on those, right? Am I failing as a founder because I'm letting myself get distracted by something else? Or is that exactly what I should be doing because I'm the one who should be thinking about big picture ideas and maybe taking slightly different directions and making changes? I worry like that is, I suddenly found all this time, but I'm not doing other things that were supposed to be on my plate.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So you set your goals, you set your priorities for the quarter. And there's always going to be distractions that come up. One of the quotes that I reference all the time, and it comes from The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho's very famous book. It's cliche to quote it, but something to the effect of the moment you set any goal, the universe is going to test your resolve. You're going to decide on your priorities, and within a week, something shiny and new is going to come up that it's going to, ask to draw you away. And there is not a blanket right answer for, yes, you should pursue that, or no, you shouldn't. The important thing is being able to look at the priorities you did set, take the shiny new object and really see, is this more important than these other three things that I identified? If it is, then priorities shift. It happens. You have to be opportunistic and willing to jump on new things as they come up. But if it's important but not as impactful as the other three things, then maybe it's something you shift to later, either next quarter, next year, or it's something, again, you delegate and you give to someone else to run.
Yes. It's part of what I'm trying to do with this idea to some extent, sort of set up the framework for it and let someone else really dig into the details. But so I want to talk, we talk about like founder drive, what pushes people. How do founders inculcate that mindset with their team? How do they bring that cultural element of success? Because you can't do it alone, right? I agree with you, but also people can be pushed to go to the next level and do things better than they maybe ever imagined. How do the best founders do that? What does that look like?
I think it comes down to something, at least at its core, very simple. Something that I'm grateful to say that I think Patrick has been exceptional at as a founder and CEO within MindMaven. So I think it is very important, at least for your direct reports, you have to know what truly matters to them. What to them, what does their ideal life path look like? And be okay with the fact that their ideal life path might not be your company for the rest of their life. What is it they want to one day become? And if you can find a way to align the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, the type of person or the type of career they want to pursue in the long run, I'm living proof, they'll follow you through hell and back. But they have to know that you care about them enough, that you understand them enough to do that. And I do feel like, Patrick and many of the CEOs that we work with, they take the time to, know who someone is, not just as an employee, not just as a direct report, but as a fully formed human with differing beliefs, different goals. You have to take the time to do that.
You want to do that. I understand your team. And then what? Are the best founders setting really clear objectives and saying we need to hit these on a regular basis? Like, what are the processes, standards, reviews that people are putting in place to say, okay, look, we've set this goal and it's going to be aggressive, and then we're going to overachieve on it? Because it seems like a lot of the best folks, well, actually, I don't really know. My impression is that a lot of them do that, but I actually don't know if it's true. They somehow get great products out the door and build successful companies. But I don't know. Is it because they were good at setting goals, or they got lucky, or what is it?
Goals are, of course, going to be a vital part of it. It's not that you can't get lucky and succeed without goals, but you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. In terms of defining the goals, though, one thing that I've seen be hugely successful and something that we do here at MindMaven a lot is, say we set a company-wide objective, like publishing this book, for instance. Huge objective. And Patrick could have stepped in and said, okay, here's the game plan. Here's what we need to get done. Here's what launch is going to look like. Instead, he more or less gave it to me and said, hey, we've never done this before. I've never done it before. This is your process. You're owning it. You figure out what the steps are, bring them to me, and then let's talk about it together. Basically, you set the goals, you set the publication date, you figure out all the things that need to happen. And that gave me a much greater sense of ownership over the process. And now it wasn't just a checklist of things I was doing because Patrick said so, because, the boss said so. It's now, this is my process. I own it. I created it. And because I own it, there's a much greater sense of personal responsibility and stake in it. And I think when you set OKRs for your team and just give them to them and say, hey, here's what you're doing, you lose some of that personal stake, or they lose some of that personal stake.
So instead, you sort of set the objective and say, the objective is actually we want to have a successful book launch, right? That was presumably Patrick's sort of mantra, successful book launch. Go figure out, Connor, all the elements to this. Did he set a timeline? Like per some of the stuff you said, did he set a timeline? Did he set a deliverable, a success metric? Like, what did he give you to sort of at least give you some structure to this? Because some people, if they don't get the structure, they'll do it, but maybe it won't be very good, or they won't even know, like, okay.
And I think part of it is being okay with the fact that some people are not going to succeed the first time around. But part of maybe the reason it took 5 years was because we did set some goals that we didn't hit. We set some deadlines that didn't work out for us because we didn't know what we didn't know. And I think a lot of that was looking in, with retrospect, a lot of it was Patrick coming in saying, hey, we're going to publish by this date and here's what we need to do. And there was no personal stake in it for me. It really wasn't until it became my project that I designed from end to end, which doesn't come naturally to me, or didn't come naturally to me for what it's worth. For a lot of people, I think that's the case. It wasn't until I owned the plan that it actually came to fruition and happened. And that's something that I see a lot with clients as well, where if all you have for your direct reports, if your one-on-ones with them is you sitting down and telling them, hey, here's what you need to get done this week, you have a much higher rate of things not getting done. There's no stake.
Did Patrick expect you to were you sending sort of weekly updates or deliverables, and like setting, like, just like, look, you set up the plan, Connor, you do all the things, but I still want to be, updated? Just like, what did he do to make sure things were following along? Because people inherently, I don't know, I've at least found more and more that people need some sort of set of goals. Like, look, I want a report. You need to put it public, make it transparent. I'm going to I can spend 3 minutes reading it over. It's more for your own sake to track progress and push yourself. But is that the right way to do it? What are the ways to set up a successful project in pushing the team to hit aggressive outputs and goals?
You've got to have accountability. And frankly, I think that's half the value of working with a coach. Sure, a coach could introduce a bunch of great workflows and patterns and habits, all of that. But half of their value is just the fact that they know you're committing to these things and they're going to hold you accountable. Same is true for any process like this, like the book launch. We did, I set these things, but Patrick didn't just set me loose for the next, 3 months as we ran the launch process. For a little while, we would meet 2 times a week to discuss where things were at. And as the launch got closer, we had a group meeting where we looped in a couple other people in the company who were involved with the book. And we met every single morning. This was the company's most important objective for the quarter. And in the last 2-ish months, every morning at 8 a.m., we had a 15-minute stand-up where it was just, hey, here's what we're committing to today. Here's what got done yesterday. Here's the problems we anticipate.
It's great. And that, first of all, I love that. But you also, to your credit, you guys ran a really good process when it comes to at least getting pre-release books into the hands of people you wanted to be sort of reviewers, getting that out there. I know it wasn't Patrick sending those emails because I read the book, but they were so really good and well run and like, hey, Adam, we remembered you said this. Are you okay publishing it? Here's the dates. Really well done and organized. Do you think then, like, how do you set up that, like, is that the sort of thing you recommend to most of your clients, is like setting things up that way where you give people that sort of level of autonomy and then go from there? Is it just like set up the process and then let it run, but give accountability, make sure that they're accountable as well?
I would, in most cases, yes. There are times where I would say if we were to run another book launch, which we more than likely will with the future books in the pipeline, I would expect that level of accountability is probably not going to be necessary. It's not going to demand as much of Patrick's time because we've tested these things. We know it, I own it, and I have hands-on experience with it now. If I still need it, or if someone still needed that degree of oversight repeatedly, that might be an indication that someone isn't a fit for the role. But it goes back to that the parenting example we talked about, where do it for them, they do it with you, you do it with them, they do it on their own. You want people who aren't reliant on you watching over their shoulder to get the job done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know it's very true. What is actually, so given that you're the delegation guy, you got this project from Patrick. How much of that do you immediately think, well, I can delegate a bunch of these pieces? And how far does it go down where people delegate, and you have someone who's 5 layers away from the initial person who got it? Like, how far should delegation go? Because presumably you would say everyone should delegate, including yourself. When do you decide when to delegate and what not to delegate?
Good question. I would say that the big thing with any type of delegation is the question you have to ask yourself is there value in me being the one to personally do this? So when it came to the production of the book, I was not delegating the writing of the book. That's my wheelhouse. It's what I do. And I would lose value by giving that to someone else. Editing, on the other hand, I'm not an editor. And I've been in the book for so long that that's something I need to delegate to someone else. We hired an editor for that. And again, I knew there was no added value. In fact, it would detract value if I were to be the one to do that myself.
But were you the one who analyzed, let's say, the editor, and you interviewed a bunch of different editors to find one who was a fit for your book? Was that you doing that?
I did. But I want to add a caveat to that. That's typically, historically, I work with an engagement manager, an assistant. In the interest of staying on top of AI, I have stopped working with an engagement manager and have been leveraging AI tools in place of that to see how is AI going to impact working with an assistant. So typically, what you just walked me through, finding an editor, that is something I would have delegated the initial pass of, hey, find me 5 editors we could work with. I would have delegated that if I had someone to delegate that to.
Okay. So you normally would do that. I kind of want to ask you what AI tools we should all be using, but it's almost moving so fast that it's almost pointless. But like that's all going to change things in big ways too. Are there ways, I mean, this is sort of a simple question, but like, how else do top tier executives increase their productivity, or should they increase their productivity? So just constant delegation and moving things on, and delegation and prioritization. Is that it? What else? Or are there other elements?
Delegation, prioritization, this kind of falls under the blanket of delegation, but most executives' meetings or their calendar schedule, they're a mess. They're in meetings from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. So learning what meetings to say no to or what meetings to modify goes a really, really long way. And if I could just give a practical exercise to people, something we'll walk clients through, I would highly recommend that you, or even better, if you have an assistant, have your assistant do this. Create a spreadsheet of every meeting that you've been in over the last 2 weeks. So create that list, and next to each meeting, give it a very binary ranking. Every single meeting on your calendar is a 1 or it's a 0. 1 is a perfect meeting. There's nothing you would change. This was the best use of your time being at this meeting for this length of time on this day. 0 is anything short of that, from complete disaster to a meeting of I never should have been in this meeting, no one was prepared, all the way up through, hey, this was a good meeting, it needed to happen. We could have done this in 30 minutes rather than 60. The only reason it took 60 minutes was because we allowed 60 minutes for it.
Yeah.
And most people don't have a healthy balance. I'd love to say you should get to 100% ones. That's not realistic. But if you can have an 80-20 balance, that's huge. And that's much better than what most people have right now.
What do you do when you have meetings that you think it's worthwhile beforehand, and then you get into it and you're like, oh, this was not a great use? So just before we did this call, I had a call sort of with a potential partner in a space with a product that I found sort of interesting. And then, halfway through, I'm like, oh, this doesn't make sense for us to work with together. It's not a good use of my time. It sort of seemed that way at the beginning, but then wasn't thereafter. How do you rank that?
There are always going to be meetings like that where you couldn't have known in advance. But what there's certain steps you can take to reduce the time that you spend on those meetings. One common tactic we'll give people is any first time meeting you take, schedule it for 15 minutes. If there's chemistry, if it looks like there's something to explore, you can always schedule a follow-up call later. But if you're meeting with someone for the first time, make it a 15-minute, 20-minute meeting. That way, if it is a disaster, well, it's only 20 minutes of your time and not 45 to 60.
So we're going to jump around a lot because I want to be cognizant of time, and I have a ton more questions here. One, because it's also personal, but two, hiring an EA. One of the first things that every founder and CEO should do, and I'm looking for a new one right now myself. What are key elements I should look for? What are mistakes that are easy to make on that front too when hiring?
Yes. Oh, man, we've got a whole chapter of the book designated to that. So I'm trying to decide where to start. Let me start with the mistake. Probably the most common mistake that we see people making, and this is coming straight from our recruiting team. So many people show up and say, hey, I want you to track down Elon Musk's former EA, or, Jeff Bezos' former EA. They want someone who has either a ton of experience as an EA or someone who's that they're hyper educated. They're an MBA grad, so they know the business world, and it just, they get these ideas of these people that they want to hire. And that really usually doesn't work out for a multitude of reasons. Usually when it comes to the really experienced person, when we talk about the role of an EA or an EM, engagement manager, as we talk about them in the book, it has a lot in common with an EA, but there's also a lot of big ways that it differs. And so if you hire someone who's been doing this for 20, 25 years, they're probably exceptional at their job. And I don't want to knock people who have been doing it a long time. But they have their own beliefs, their own systems, their own ways of the way they think things should be done. And incorporating some of the newer tactics or the newer strategies, like using AI or dictating emails, these things that are not traditionally within the EA wheelhouse, it can be really hard to do with someone who's been doing this job for 30 years. And so we've seen high turnover when people do that, where someone gets into the role and realizes, oh, this isn't what I thought. I'm out of here. I want a more traditional role. And that the really educated route, again, not knocking it, a lot of recent MBA grads specifically look for assistant roles at companies so they can network and build relationships and get their foot in the door. They're not looking for a long-term commitment, though. A great EA you're with for years. We've had tons of clients who have founded multiple companies, and they've taken their EA with them from company to company. It's the one person they take with them wherever they go. And your MBA grad, they want to be a founder, and they're looking to become a founder or a chief of staff or something as quickly as possible and see this role as a stepping stone. So all of that to say, the big mistake is looking at the wrong profile when it comes to a good EA. Usually just a couple years of somewhat relevant experience, even if it's not directly EA, but they've been in project management or they've been in anything where they're managing time, goes a long way. And you don't need someone with that MBA grad. A good person can learn quickly and learn on their feet.
Okay. And so what's the level like, okay, so I can buy the project management stuff, but what is in the level of being really good in caring deeply about what, like having some knowledge of what it really means to be an EA to some extent? Like where there's, is it sort of like, hey, like you have 5 years of, is it someone who has sort of 5 years of experience, young enough in the role that they're still like learning and open-minded, but also know what it really means to deal with like good founders have high expectations and they want to move fast. And if you can't keep up, it can be, I burned out at least 2, maybe 3 EAs because like, I like to think it's not because I'm mean to them, but it's because I do have high expectations. I'm like, hey, like I need to get you to get this done. And here's a time frame that I think is legitimate. And let's walk through it. I try to do all the right things, but sometimes there's like, this isn't for me or this is too much. So I kind of feel like I'm almost at a point personally where I'm like, I need to find someone who understands what it means to work with people who want to move fast, at least.
Yes, absolutely. So I would say 5 years is good. Usually what we see, candidates are 2 to 3 years of related experience. If they happen to have been an EA, great. But again, we've seen great results in project management. Teachers, actually, people who've worked in nonprofits. It's almost more important from our perspective that you find someone with a good personality fit for the role, someone who has that genuine desire to learn, who has we talk about the 5 traits a lot in the chapters of both talking about hiring an EA, where you want someone who has great resilience. You want someone who has a genuine love of learning, who doesn't settle for this is the way things always been done and these are the tools I've used, so I'm going to continue doing. Finding someone who has that and having a way to measure those traits throughout the interview process is huge. So you mentioned, how do you hire someone who really understands what it's going to be like? Part of that is their background. But one place that I feel like a lot of people fail when it comes to recruiting an assistant is having some sort of an assessment project. At the risk of bragging on our recruiting team, they have this assessments that they run every single candidate through. If someone wants to work with us, or if they want to work with one of the clients that we place for, they have to go through this multi-stage process, but there's all sorts of traps built in. From the most basic of the first time they reach out, we send them a broken URL. So we say, hey, go to mindmaven.com, but it's IN rather than EN, and fill out this page. If someone responds back and says, hey, the link's broken, well, they didn't take the time to stop and think through, how could I solve this on my own? So that tells us, hey, they don't think proactively or have problem solving. All the way to more advanced things like sending them dictation, saying, hey, turn these into emails, and seeing what they come up with. So you really want to train. You don't just want to interview, you want to assess somewhat the way someone thinks and behaves in real world situations that reflect what it's going to be like as your assistant.
Yeah. Those are also hard to set up, I think, for a lot of things, but it's, I assume the same the same general things apply to any hiring, right? Like any job role, most likely. But also once again, like how do you take the time to do it? Because once again, I find so many founders don't think deeply about the person they're hiring or why. They're just sort of, I have this pain, I need to solve it, I'm going to throw a body at it. And don't actually think, well, should I even hire for the role? What do I really need? Can I outsource some of it and maybe see, at least test the waters for what we're going to get? Those sorts of things, it seems rare, but why?
It's a good question. I think part of that comes from just the founder's natural desire to see a fire, put it out, move on to the next one, just as quickly as possible. I'll add the caveat to all of these that recruiting is not my area of expertise. I think especially there are certain roles that you can get away with that around, where you don't have to put a ton of thought into it. When it comes to recruiting an assistant, that is arguably one of the most valuable hires that you're going to make. A good assistant or a bad assistant can make or break you and the organization, depending on how much you give to them. And in the interest of delegation, the interest of, if something doesn't have to be done by you, it shouldn't be done by you. You probably, if you've never worked with an assistant before, you probably shouldn't be the one hiring. You don't know what to look for. And that's true of any role, assistants, certain VP roles. If you don't know how to measure success, find someone who does and work with them.
We joke about this when I talk to our potential customers, say like your choice as a founder to do operations work is you do it yourself, which, as we talked about, is a terrible idea for a bunch of reasons. Or you hire someone internal, but that means you literally have to recruit, hire, train, manage someone for a role you don't know how to do. Do you really think that's going to be successful? Give me a break. Like there's no chance. Then that person's going to wash out in 6 months. It's going to be bad for the team morale, all that other stuff. And then all the work they were doing probably wrong. And now there's all these errors rolls back up to you as a founder. and you've wasted a huge amount of time. Like, what a terrible decision. But yet founders do it all the time.
Absolutely. It's the quickest way to solve the problem, or at least it seems that way in the moment. So again, it comes back to delegate what you can and find someone who knows what they're doing and let them do it.
Yeah. No, look, that is the right way of thinking through this. So actually, I want to ask one last question. Then two of my last questions that I asked. One's different, in which is thinking about going back to this entrepreneurial excellence and what does real success look like. When you think through the founders that you've worked with, especially over the long term, how many of them have left being a founder, whether they achieved success or didn't? And what have they moved into that leads to a greater level of success or happiness for them? Is it because they matured and they got over whatever that drive or push was for them? Do they go in a different direction? I see so many founders who go in to become executive coaches or go become a venture capitalist. What is it about that where it's like, hey, I want to go in a different direction? I mean, they might say, I got burned out, whatever it is. Like, why didn't they actually find joy and happiness in being an entrepreneur? Or what made people go in a different direction?
That's interesting. I'm running through a mental list of my roster right now. The only people who have moved on to other roles that I'm aware of have moved on to other founder roles. I'm trying to think of anyone who decided, you know what, being a founder is not for me.
Once you sort of once they got in it, at least most of your clients that they're in it, maybe not to win it. I mean, hopefully to win it, but they're in it one way or the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm struggling to think of someone who left for something wildly different, executive coaching or otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I asked once again for personal reasons. I mean, my wife and I, there's some frustrating stuff at work for me, and that's just part of being a founder. And she sort of said, well, what else would you rather be doing? It kind of says like, I don't think there's anything else. Like, I'm learning every single day, and it's mentally engaging for me to think through and try to solve these knotty challenges and problems. But man, it's tough. It's not always fun. It's frustrating. It's like, man, what did I do to mess this up? How could I have done better? So maybe it is just the path people get on.
I think for many people, especially by the time someone can afford to work with us, they bought into the journey. They know what they're in it for the long haul. If it's not this company, it's another one. The vast majority of them, if not all of them, I think I'm proud to say, I don't think anyone has succumbed to burnout. We're doing our job right. We're giving them systems where that's not as much a risk anymore.
Do you think people have gotten smarter and better over the past just because society's changed a bit, where it's like it's not maybe quite as sexy to burn yourself out, and it's a little bit, we just have a healthier mindset maybe around work than people used to?
I think we are moving away from that, the hustle and grind culture back when those were the hashtags to use. I think we are moving away from that as we're seeing the consequences of it. We're seeing people who lived that way and it looked really sexy and great for a 5-year period. And then so many of them burned out and they realized it wasn't sustainable. So I think people are seeking more holistic approaches to work in life. I'm seeing more holistic answers on that 2-list homework you and I discussed that, do more of, do less of. I'm seeing for things like meditation and reading and exercise. And I want more time with family. It's not all just, hey, here's all the work things that I want to do now.
Yeah, which is good. It's healthier that way. So Connor, I asked everybody at the end of the podcast, if there's one single piece of advice that you would give to every founder for entrepreneurial excellence, what would that be?
Oh, it's an easy one for me. It's the piece of advice that actually made me fall in love with MindMaven and apply to join the company in the first place. And it's very simple. Now, we talk about relationships a lot and how investing into relationships is important. The simplest relationship management habit I can give anyone is this. If you can get in the habit of sending one email a day to someone you would not otherwise have reached out to that day, so that if replying to an email doesn't count. This is one email to someone in your network, someone on your team you would not otherwise have sent an email to. Do that every day for a year. That's anywhere between 280 and 300, whatever, new emails. I can practically guarantee at least one of those emails is going to lead to some sort of opportunity you wouldn't otherwise have had. Whether that's a financial opportunity for fundraising or a talent opportunity or just reconnecting with someone. Get in the habit of one email a day. If you dictate it to an assistant or AI, it's a minute, 2 minutes of your time, and it's huge. It's huge.
And how do you come up with even the people to reach out? Is it just like the person pops into my head, I see a post on LinkedIn from them, whatever it is? And yeah, I mean, how do you even choose, right? I have thousands of people I've met in my career.
Mm-hmm. Like you touched on, most people who have been in business for any meaningful amount of time, they have a network of hundreds, if not thousands of people they've met and interacted with over the years. And not every relationship's created equal. So I think it's really important for founders, for anyone for that matter, to figure out who are the relationships that matter most to you. We call these people typically your legends. And really, for the most part, it's 30 people maximum. Who are the 30 most influential people in your network who can get you the results you're looking for? So typically when we're setting this up with a client, we walk them through a very simple process. Step one is figure out, what do you want from your network? When I talk about better managing your relationships, for you, why? Is it fundraising? Because that's the stage you're in. Is it talent? Is it just mentorship or connection? No right or wrong answer, but figure out what the hell you want from your network. Step number one. Step number two, based on those goals, what are the groups of people in your network who have the greatest access to those types of opportunities? Not specific people, but groups at this stage. If you want fundraising, well, current investors, VCs, fellow startup CEOs. These are all great groups who probably hear about these types of opportunities. And then once you have the groups, you can figure out the people within your fellow CEO bucket. Who are the founders who have the greatest access to fundraising opportunities, or the investors you really want to invest into? And if you can figure out who these 30 to 50 people are, then that's your list. Make sure you touch these people once a month. They get one email from you a month that's perceived as meaningful, relevant, valuable. Even if it's just a, hey, saw your LinkedIn post, love the article you shared, here's my key takeaway. Again, 2 to 3 minutes of your time, even less if you're working with an assistant who can review the article for you and write the email. All you have to do is review and press send. That's how you figure out who you need to be reaching out to. Know what you want, know the groups, and then you can figure out the who.
And then what do you usually put in those emails? If it's sort of a one email per day, basically, so 300 plus emails per year that you're going to be sending out. Is it just like, hey, like, was thinking about you and wanted to just check in, like, hope things are good, and once you have your EA, maybe add, saw you took a new job a few months ago, hope it's going well.
Sometimes there's only so many times with each person you can use the, hey, you were on my mind, or hey, it's been a while, we should catch up.
Well, if you're sending a new email to one person every day and you're only hitting, hey, it's once a year, you probably can be like, hey, it's been a while. Like, that's probably, you probably use the same template for most people.
Yes and no. There's multiple types of emails. The point is that you do want it to be simple. So if I could give a couple quick tactics around this. Number one, you kind of touched on already. We call it trigger touch. But basically, it's just you reacting to a trigger. You're scrolling LinkedIn, you see someone started a new job, there's your outreach for the day. Or whatever. They posted an article, they were interviewed in Forbes. All of that is totally fair game. You don't always have that luxury, though. The people that you want to reach out to aren't always posting something every single day. So if you don't have something to react to, you can use what we call the 5 freebies. They're 5 email, not even templates, but examples or inspirations you can use. The easiest one to use is a thank you email. We take any one of the 30 to 50 people you identify. If I were to put you on the spot and say, hey, Adam, what could you thank this person for? I almost guarantee you can come up with something. Whether it was an introduction they made 6 months ago, a piece of advice they gave you 3 years ago that had an impact on your life. Find something small and unexpected. Write a thank you message to them, and it's going to make their day. Especially if it's small and happened a long time ago. So they haven't thought of it, and you send it hey, this is out of the blue, but I was thinking of that advice you gave me 3 years back. I don't know if I ever told you, but here's how it impacted me. I still carry it with me to this day. Just wanted to let you know you were on my mind. Cheers, Adam. Really simple, 3 to 5 line email, but make someone's day. So thank them, ask for a favor, apologize is another good one. If it's been a long time, send an apology email. If you promised an introduction but never followed through on it, send an apology email. Happens all the time. But don't overthink it. You don't need to blow people away with value. A lot of people overcomplicate this and think, okay, I need to send this really, really hyper valuable message, and they talk themselves out of it because it's going to be a 20-minute endeavor. Just north of neutral is all you need to aim for. If it's just north of neutral, it's going to put a smile on someone's face. It'll be a positive experience. And regardless of whether or not they respond to the email, you still get refreshed your mind share. You were top of mind with them. And in the long run, that's what's going to pay dividends, staying top of mind with the people who are most relevant.
It's one of those easy things that I can imagine being incredibly powerful and valuable, because if you have a strong network, nurturing that network is so powerful and valuable. Connor, thank you so much for the time. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about MindMaven, about Radical Delegation, about you? How can folks get in touch? You do not have a big LinkedIn presence, so how can people find you and get in touch?
Easiest way would probably be to shoot me an email. Or frankly, some of my favorite part of my job is just connecting with people, even if they're not clients. We jump on a quick call, talk through what's, their two lists that they make the list of things they want to do less of and more of. So shoot me an email at connor.d at MindMaven, MindMaven.com. Feel free to grab the book on Amazon. That is available both as an ebook and a paperback right now. And you're welcome to connect on LinkedIn. But like you said, I'm not super active on there. Email's going to be the best way to reach me.
And your EA or your AI assistant will probably answer the first version of that, but you'll still get a meeting and get in touch at some point.
Absolutely. And I review every email before it goes out. So you're still hearing from me.
Which is amazing. Connor, and I can, by the way, recommend the book. It's, as I mentioned to me, I want my team to read. So everyone go out there, buy the book, learn more, delegate, free up your time. And thank you so much for your time. It is meaningful whenever anyone gives it to spend time with me so I can learn and hopefully the audience can learn as well. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Adam. It's a great opportunity to be on here. I love what you're doing. I've got some videos or some podcasts to catch up on. I haven't gone through all yours yet.